Welcome to Serial Napper, the bedtime podcast for people who fall asleep to true crime. This episode gets dark, so if you're sensitive to graphic content, maybe skip the nightcap. You've been warned. Hey everyone, my name is Nikki Young, and this is Serial Napper, the true crime podcast for naps. I'm back with another true crime story to lull you to sleep, or perhaps to give you nightmares. We're heading back to August 20th, 2004, to the kind of place that looks like it was plucked right out of a Bob Ross painting. I'm talking tall trees, quiet lakes, and mountain air so clean it probably smells like pine-scented dreams. That picturesque spot was Cuberant Lake, tucked up in Utah's high Uintas wilderness, and it's where 12-year-old Garrett Bardsley vanished without a trace. Garrett was there with his dad Kevin and a whole group of Boy Scouts and leaders. It was supposed to be a wholesome bonding trip. Just some fishing, camping, and campfire chats. Instead, it became every parent's worst nightmare. That morning, Garrett and Kevin had been fishing near the lake when Garrett accidentally stepped into the cold water, soaking his shoes and socks. No big deal, he told his dad he was heading back to the camp, which was only about 150 yards away, to change. That's like a 1-minute walk. He didn't take a backpack, no food, nothing. Just wet shoes and the plan to meet up back shortly. But he never made it. Garrett was last seen around 8 a.m. and after that, nothing. No sign of him at the campsite. No response when his name was called. He was just gone. What followed was one of the largest and most intense search efforts in the region's history. Dogs, helicopters, thermal imaging, everything. And yet, the only possible clue was a single Nike ankle sock found in a rocky field half a mile away. Garrett's mom swore that it was his, but one of the searchers later claimed that it actually belonged to him. And just like that, the sock went from potential evidence to a weirdly confusing dead end. So, dim the lights, put your phone down, and listen as we question how a 12-year-old vanishes in broad daylight in the middle of a camp full of people without a single solid clue. So let's jump right in. Before we go any further into the disappearance itself, let's take a moment to talk about who Garrett Bardsley really was, because this isn't just a mystery in the woods. This is a story about a real, vibrant little boy who should have come home from that camping trip with a fishtail and a sunburn, not become a missing person poster. Garrett was the baby of the Bardsley family, the youngest of 4 kids. His parents, Heidi and Kevin, adored him, and his older siblings, let's just say, like most youngest siblings, he knew how to stir the pot in all the right ways. Garrett had a hard time with reading, and he had to go to a special early morning class to get a little bit of extra help. But this kid was determined, like relentlessly determined. During family scripture study, Garrett would actually beg his parents to let him read more. Meanwhile, his brothers and sister, they were practically holding prayer circles hoping that he wouldn't, because they knew he'd be stuck there forever. He didn't care. He wanted to read. He wanted to get better. His parents said that he was the same way at school, always raising his hand, always volunteering, and always eager. He loved school so much that even when he was sick, he'd still try to go because he genuinely loved learning. He was supposed to start middle school just a few days after that camping trip. Can you imagine how excited and nervous that he must have been? New school, new teachers, new locker to figure out. But he never got the chance. Garrett's friends and family also say that he was hilarious, The kind of kid always cracking jokes, being silly, and making weird faces. He was the class clown without being obnoxious. At scout camp or sporting events, he'd be the first to cheer someone on and to yell out, "Good job," or to help pick up a teammate who was falling behind. His older brother, Alex, remembers him being that kind of light in every room. Not just funny, but kind too. So, yeah, Garrett wasn't just a boy who went missing in the mountains. He was a little brother, a student, a joker, a cheerleader, a hard worker, a goofy, bright spark of a kid who deserved to grow up. And that's what makes what happened next so gut-wrenching. So let's rewind to the start of this trip, the one that was supposed to be all about fresh air, s'mores, and catching fish for breakfast. Garrett had just turned 12 a few weeks earlier. He'd been camping before, but this wasn't exactly his wheelhouse. He was still new to it all. His dad, Kevin, would later describe him as innocent, without any hardness of the world. Just a sweet, good-natured kid looking forward to a few days in the woods with his scout troop and his dad. The two of them lived in Elk Ridge, Utah, and they were out on a Boy Scout trip with 18 other scouts and 6 or 7 adults. They'd arrived on Thursday, August 19th, and they were planning to head home on Saturday. It was going to be just a short little getaway. Now, on the morning of Friday, August 20th, Garrett and Kevin woke up early to do some father-son fishing. They made their way down to a peaceful little lake called Cuberant, nestled in the Uintas Mountains, while the rest of the group stayed up at their campsite, about 150 to maybe 250 feet up the hill, the kind of distance where you can yell to someone and they can still hear you clearly. It wasn't far. Garrett was wearing his usual gear and carrying a little fishing pole. But as kids do, he got excited, he lost his footing, and he ended up stepping right into the lake, just enough to soak his shoes, socks, and pants. So he told his dad he was going to go head back up to camp for a quick change. He didn't want to sit around in wet clothes while waiting for a fish to bite. He told his dad, Kevin, "I'll be right back." The plan was to change and then come right back down to keep fishing. Kevin wasn't worried. They'd already walked that same short trail multiple times. It was a well-established path that connected right to the camp and even to a road just a quarter mile away. Kevin even watched Garrett walk up, calling out reminders, pointing towards the path that would lead him straight up to the camp. It wasn't risky and it wasn't remote. It was just a short walk. But 20 minutes passed and Garrett hadn't come back. At first, Kevin probably figured he'd gotten distracted. Maybe he stopped to chat with the other scouts and maybe he decided to grab a snack. But when Kevin made his way up to the camp to check in, he was hit with that gut-sinking realization. Garrett wasn't there. Worse, no one had seen him, not one of the other scouts, not a single adult. That short walk, the one they'd done before, Garrett never arrived. Cue panic. Kevin and the others began searching right away. The forest was scanned, shouted through, walked over again and again. Before long, the official search teams arrived. Hundreds of people, both professionals and volunteers, poured into the woods over the next several days. They brought in search dogs, helicopters, infrared tech, and thermal imaging. It was an all-hands-on-deck mission. But there was no trace of Garrett, no footprints, no clothing, no gear, except for one thing, a Nike ankle sock found in a field of boulders about half a mile from where Garrett had last been seen. Garrett's mom swore that it was his. She said that she recognized it. But weirdly, one of the searchers later said, wait, that's actually my sock. Which, how? Why? Who even takes off a sock mid-search? And just like that, the one semi-promising lead unraveled into more confusion. The fishing pole Garrett had been carrying, never found, not even a piece of it. Remember, the camp was less than a quarter mile from the lake and right off a clearly marked trail. A family friend would later say that the walk was no more than 150 paces. That's less than the distance between your couch and the fridge. And yet, Garrett vanished, completely. Now, if you've never been to the high Uintas wilderness in Utah, let me paint a picture for you. Imagine the kind of place that could be on a postcard or one of those peaceful hiking TikToks. Towering pine trees, pristine lakes that reflect the sky like a mirror, jagged peaks in the distance, and the kind of silence you only get when you're miles away from the nearest road. It's stunning, but it's also a little unforgiving. This isn't your local campground with signs and cell service. We're talking about more than 450,000 acres of wilderness. No paved roads, no trail markers once you're deep in. The kind of terrain where everything starts to look the same. Trees, rocks, and more trees. And the trails, they're often narrow, uneven, and sometimes barely trails at all. Even seasoned hikers can lose their bearings out there. The thick tree cover muffles the sound and it blocks out the sun, making it hard to get a sense of direction. Add to that the sudden changes in weather, like surprise snow flurries, rainstorms, or plummeting nighttime temperatures. All of that combined, and you've got yourself a recipe for danger. The distance between the lake and the camp where Garrett disappeared was only about 150 to maybe 250 feet. A short walk, just a couple of minutes. But in a place like the Uintas, a few steps off the trail can lead you completely off course. It's not dramatic to say that someone could vanish within shouting distance, especially if they panic or if they try to self-correct their route. And that's part of what makes Garrett's disappearance so haunting. He wasn't trying to wander off, he was just going back to change his socks. Yet in this massive wild landscape, it's like he evaporated into the trees. The search for Garrett Bardsley would become one of the most intense, emotional, and heartbreaking efforts in Utah's history. But in those first hours, no one even expected it to go that far. Not yet, not at first. His scout leader, Wally Trotter, said that there could have been any number of reasons Garrett got off track. Maybe he simply took a wrong turn. Maybe he tripped. But one theory that's always haunted Wally is Garrett's fear of wildlife, specifically bears. You see, a while back at another scout camp, this one packed with over 400 boys, Garrett came running into camp absolutely terrified. He said he'd just seen a bear. Wally wasn't so sure at first. He figured that maybe Garrett had let his imagination get the better of him. But after asking a few questions, Wally's doubts faded. So, naturally, like any scout leader tasked with supervising a bunch of rowdy kids, Wally decided to turn it into an adventure. "Let's go see if we can find him," he told them. They headed into the woods, full-on bravery mode, until Wally suddenly yelled, "Look out, there it is!" and the boys scattered like popcorn. Funny now, sure. But Garrett's fear was real, and Wally would later wonder if, in that quiet mountain forest, if Garrett alone maybe turned around, thought he saw something again, something big, something dangerous, and in his panic, maybe he ran. Meanwhile, Garrett's dad, Kevin, was spiraling. He said all he wanted in the world was to find his son. The second thing he wanted most, for Heidi, his wife, to be there with him, but he was terrified to make that phone call. He could picture it, his son crying in a field, calling for his parents, scared and cold and alone. He did finally make the call. Heidi was out of town, but the second she heard her husband's voice and what had happened, she said she just knew. She had a sick feeling in her gut. She didn't believe that Garrett would be found. Kevin wasn't ready to believe that, not yet. In those first few days, he ran on adrenaline and fear, searching until midnight while everyone else tried to sleep. He couldn't help but think, if I'm freezing out here with a jacket and a car, how cold is Garrett? That guilt wasn't just Kevin's. His mother, Heidi, also couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat, knowing that her youngest son was somewhere out there without even the basics: warmth, food, safety. Scout leader Wally, too, felt the weight of it, especially Saturday night when the rain rolled in and he crawled into his dry tent, changed into dry clothes, and zipped up in a warm sleeping bag. He said, quote, "All I could think about was that I've got a boy out there who doesn't have those, and I felt guilty for being warm. The search was massive. That first weekend, hundreds of volunteers and professionals covered the mountain, yelling Garrett's name, shining lights, and hoping that he'd see or hear them. Helicopters flew overhead, calling out to him over a loudspeaker. They lit bonfires around the lakes. Men stayed up all night, praying that Garrett might be drawn to the light, to the warmth. And for a brief moment, Saturday brought sunshine, and with it, hope. The searchers felt re-energized. But that day also brought heartbreak. The scouts, including Garrett's brothers, they were all sent home. Wally watched as Cameron and Jared, Garrett's older brothers, packed up his things into his backpack, and it crushed him, taking his belongings home, but not taking Garrett home with them. Then it started to rain again. The temperature would drop below freezing that night. Wally knew what that meant. If Garrett was still out there and he was wet, he might not survive another night. By then, Garrett's mom Heidi had made it to the mountain, and she wasn't expecting a miracle, but she needed to be there for her husband, for herself, for Garrett. Her presence calmed Kevin, even if only for a little while, and still, he searched. By Sunday, 2 full days after Garrett disappeared, the mood turned desperate. Hope was flickering, but fading. And then it snowed, and slowly the crowds began to shrink. People had jobs, homes, families. Volunteers packed up. Even Wally had to leave. On Tuesday, the search was officially reclassified from a rescue to a recovery. Still, people came. About 1,000 volunteers showed up that second weekend. But by Sunday, Summit County called it off. That was it. That was a tough day, Wally said. I was going home without one of my boys. It wasn't right to leave one there. So let's take a moment and think about how a 12-year-old might react if they suddenly found themselves lost in the middle of the wilderness. It's obviously not as simple as panic or stay calm. It's complicated. According to experts, kids around Garrett's age, they're at a tricky spot developmentally. They're starting to have more independence and reasoning skills, but they still don't always think like adults. When faced with a survival situation, a 12-year-old might experience a mix of fear and confusion. Some kids might freeze or hide, hoping someone will find them. Others might try to retrace their steps or walk farther, thinking that they can find help, even if that means moving deeper into the wilderness. Panic is definitely a possibility, especially if the child encounters something frightening like wildlife or an unfamiliar terrain. Panic can cause them to make quick decisions that, in hindsight, aren't helpful, like running without a clear direction. But here's the thing, kids also have an amazing resilience. They might call out for help, try to remember the advice that they've been given in Scouts, or even attempt to find shelter or warmth if they realize the seriousness of the situation. For Garrett, who was described by his dad as innocent and without any hardness of the world, it's heartbreaking to imagine what he might have been feeling. Scared, confused, determined, probably all of the above. Children in survival situations are incredibly unpredictable, and the best thing searchers can do is keep that in mind, that a child might be hiding nearby or moving or calling out quietly. It's why every search is a race against time and uncertainty. Now, here's where things start to get a little bit weird. We've gone from a seemingly simple camping trip to a massive, heartbreaking search, to absolutely nothing. No sign of Garrett, no trail, no closure, just silence. Naturally, there are a few theories floating around, none of them super comforting. Theory number 1, he got lost and he succumbed to the elements. This is the theory that officials eventually leaned into. It's the one that feels most normal, most explainable. 12-year-old Garrett is walking back to camp. He takes a wrong turn. He gets disoriented. He wanders deeper into the woods. It's happened before. It happens a lot, actually. People underestimate how quickly you can get turned around in the wilderness, especially when everything starts to look the same. trees, rocks, more trees, and panic is a hell of a drug. It makes your brain fuzzy. It makes you think if you just keep walking, you'll figure it out. And by the time you realize you're really in trouble, it's too late. But here's the thing. The trail was short, straightforward, familiar. Garrett had walked it multiple times already. It was less than 250 feet from where his dad last saw him to the camp. And again, we're not talking about thick Amazonian jungle here. This was a popular Boy Scout camping site, with searchers crawling the area within minutes of Garrett's disappearance. Dogs, horses, ATVs, planes, helicopters. Even if he had kept walking, gotten turned around, climbed through brush and trees, something would have been found, you would think, but there's no trace. No broken branches, no scent, no backpack, no fishing pole, not even a shoe. The only thing ever found was a single Nike sock in a boulder field about half a mile away. Some said it belonged to Garrett. One of the searchers said no, actually it was his. So even that's not confirmed. Which leads us to the next theory. Theory number 2, animal attack. This one gets tossed around a lot. And yeah, on paper, it makes a weird kind of sense. Garrett had a real fear of bears. He had a close encounter at a previous scout camp and he was terrified. What if he ran into another one? What if it spooked him and he bolted into the woods trying to get away? Or worse, what if something actually did get him? Utah is home to black bears, mountain lions, bobcats. It's not out of the question. And a scared, disoriented child alone in the woods could absolutely be vulnerable. But here's the problem with this theory. Animal attacks are messy. They're violent, loud. They leave trails, drag marks, blood, torn clothing, prints, hair, something. And again, the searchers found none of that. And you're telling me in a search involving hundreds of people on the ground and in the air, not one person found a sign of a struggle, a trail of paw prints, nothing? It doesn't really track. Theory number 3 is he was abducted. Now we're heading into darker territory. It's the theory that maybe someone took him. It's not a theory officials have leaned into much, but it's one that's haunted the people closest to Garrett. Because if it wasn't exposure, if it wasn't an animal, then what's left? Could there have been a predator, a human predator in the area? A hiker with bad intentions? Someone watching from the trees who saw an opportunity? This theory actually explains a lot of the lack of evidence. If Garrett had been abducted, his body wouldn't be in the search area. His clothes wouldn't be. His fishing pole wouldn't be. The search dogs wouldn't have found anything because there wasn't anything to find. In this version, Garrett was there one moment, then gone the next. But here's the problem. There were no witnesses. No other campers reported seeing anything unusual. There were no tire tracks, no unfamiliar people at the trailhead, no security footage, no tips, no arrests. So while the abduction theory fills in some of the blanks, it also creates a ton of new ones. And then there's that last category, the one we never like to admit exists, the unknown. Some people talk about portal theories or missing 411 type cases where people vanish in the wilderness under strange, unexplained circumstances. Invisible walls, sudden disorientation, moments of silence, vanishing within seconds. And of course, it sounds out there. It is out there. But people fall back on these theories when the more rational ones just don't stick. The truth is, the wilderness can be weird and terrifying, and sometimes unforgiving in a way that we can't even begin to understand. After the search was officially called off, after the volunteers packed up and went home, and the helicopters stopped circling the trees, and the bonfires went cold, the Bardsley family was left with the one thing that no parent should ever have to live with. Silence, no answers, no closure, and no Garrett. But instead of letting that silence consume them, they did something really incredible with it. They turned it into something that could help others. something that could keep Garrett's name alive in the most meaningful way possible. They created the Garrett Bardsley Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping locate missing persons, especially in wilderness terrain where time is precious and resources are often scarce. But they didn't stop there. The foundation also works to build schools in impoverished nations, a beautiful gesture rooted in Garrett's love of learning and his relentless optimism. Because Garrett may have struggled with reading, but he never gave up. He wanted to learn. He begged to read out loud, even when it took him forever. And now, his name is helping kids around the world access education that he loved so much. That's the kind of legacy his family wanted for him. And it didn't stop with Garrett's case. Not long after Garrett's disappearance, another Boy Scout went missing in the very same mountains, 11-year-old Brennan Hawkins. The parallels were eerie. Same general area, same age range, another terrified family. Brennan was lost for about 25 hours before being found safe. His disappearance reminded many just how easy it is to get turned around in those mountains, even for kids who are somewhat familiar with the terrain. Kevin Bardsley joined the search, channeling the heartbreak of losing his own son into a desperate hope to bring someone else's boy home. And Brennan was found, alive. Kevin got to be part of that miracle. And while it doesn't erase his pain, it did give him something, proof that sometimes the story can end differently. Still, of course, the grief never fully goes away. It just morphs into something quieter, something that shows up in the in-between moments. Kevin admits he still wrestles with the whole thing. He said, quote, "I just couldn't believe we couldn't find him, and that was a hard thing." Wally, Garrett's scout leader, also wrestles with it, but he holds on to a kind of stubborn hope. When kids say they've looked in a million places, he reminds them, quote, "A million places seems like a big number, but there are a billion places to look, and we haven't looked in the right place. And someday, maybe they will find that right place." In the meantime, life does go on, but Garrett is never far from anyone's thoughts. The bracelets that once read "Find Garrett" have since been changed to "Remember Garrett," because that's the mission now, to remember the boy who cracked jokes and encouraged his friends and ran through the woods with wet socks and a fishing pole, dreaming of catching breakfast. To remember the feeling of thousands of strangers uniting in the hope of bringing him home. To remember his light even in the dark. The Bardsleys, along with the Scouts, they've returned to the Mirror Lake trailhead, back to the same place where Garrett vanished. It's hard. The memories there are heavy, but Kevin believes it's really important. It's a way to face the pain and to honor it. Garrett was also posthumously awarded the Spirit of the Eagle, an honor given to Scouts who were on their way to earning their Eagle rank, but passed away before completing it. And the lake, the one where Garrett was last seen, it holds a sacredness now, not just for the Bardsleys, but for everyone who's ever heard Garrett's story. Heidi and Kevin say they feel it when they return. Something still, something quiet, something that feels almost like love. Garrett Bardsley's disappearance remains one of those heartbreaking mysteries where every what if lingers in the air. A bright, adventurous boy with so much ahead of him, gone without a trace in a wilderness that's as beautiful as it is unforgiving. The high Uintas holds their secrets close. For Garrett's family, friends, and the countless volunteers who search those rugged trails, the pain of not knowing, it's still raw. But from that pain, something powerful emerged, a foundation dedicated to helping others lost in the wild, and a community bound together by hope and remembrance. Sometimes the wilderness wins, leaving us with more questions than answers, but every time we share Garrett's story, we keep his memory alive, reminding us all to cherish the little moments, the laughter, the adventures, and the bravery it takes to face the unknown. So tonight, as you drift off, maybe with your favorite true crime podcast playing softly in the background, spare a thought for Garrett, the boy who loved the mountains, whose story is still unfolding somewhere out there in the pines. And if you ever find yourself wandering a path, remember, the wild isn't just nature. It's a reminder of how precious and fragile life can be. That's it for me tonight. If you want to reach out, you can find me on Facebook at Serial Napper. You can find my audio on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. I post all of my episodes in video format over on YouTube, so go check it out. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'd love if you can give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Every little bit helps. I'm also on Patreon if you'd like to get your Serial Napper episodes early and ad-free, plus a bonus episode every month. Hop on over and check out all the details at patreon.com/serialnapper. Until next time, sweet dreams, stay kind, especially in the comments. Bye.